You are in a good mood, and we can begin now. I'm Vladislav Azersky, and my colleague is Dmitry Kardava. We work at F.A.C.T, and we respond to various security incidents. Here's an overview of what we do, but that's not the most exciting thing. Let's look at what we are to discuss today. First is what DFIR specialist looks at and what challenges they come across. Okay, and digital forensics, as we all know, is a subfield of forensics that focuses on the recovery examination of digital evidence from digital devices. And the digital forensics can be divided into 4 main stages: collection, examination, analysis, and reporting. But one thing to be remembered here, how forensics is different from something else. There are some questions that we are supposed to find answers to. Say there's a client who had their currency stolen, they use cold wallets, and they made transactions using their laptop, but at some point in time they have nothing in their account. And they approach us and ask to do a forensic investigation to see if it is possible to understand what happened and to gain back their money. Next is incident response. And what we need to remember here is that we need to restore the chain of events from initial access to impact. Sometimes not just analyzing that, but also recovering the customer's infrastructure and to give them recommendations on what to do next. The next point is compromise assessment. It's not as prompt in its nature as the previous 2 ones. What we do here is that we collect logs from wherever we can to identify incidents, or maybe to understand that currently there's an active APT which is stealing data right away. And why did we describe all of those areas? Because when we need to analyze attackers, we need to know what to do. And when we get some servers to investigate, often they are Linux-based servers. We were not able to fit all the workflow in 50 minutes, so we'll do a high-level overview for you. With the main idea that we need to do a first analysis and to come up with the very first assessment. And I will talk about a Windows segment. When we come across Windows, we need to remember that the first thing that people can use to connect is RDP. We look at event logs, and we need to remember that there are many logs that we can look at to see where server connections happened. In a server, we can have an RDG service that generates logs. We collect all of that And we analyze that. We can give this information to data intelligence to see if there are any links to any hacker groups. In the event logs themselves, we can find RDP cache and see how the attackers connected and what they did. Or maybe they already got access to the infrastructure to some clients. And similar things, such as anti-user.dat and other event logs. Okay, so suppose we have identified that the hackers mostly used RDP, and let's think of what we could do next. We can look at what there in the server, and let's take a look at what's in that server. Program files x86, and program data for every user. You can see that certain pieces of software were in that server. Okay, so now we have identified the software, and we give those clues to an analyst for them to look for artifacts that this or that piece of software can generate. But let's also remember such good things as remote access tools. There are many of those. Not just to develop the attack, but also to connect to our infrastructure. AnyDesk and TeamViewer are the most obvious choices, but there are much more. And there are descriptions of what artifacts they generate and what you want to look for. But this is just for you to remember that aside from RDP, you can connect using remote access tools. Okay, so now we have established that we can connect through RDP or through remote access tools, but let's understand what could be useful to understand what activity is happening on the server. A server can be used for searching information. We can look up for stealer logs. Or a server can be exploited to connect to the infrastructure through a VPN, for example, and often customers don't have a two-factor authentication. Now, if we have the server, we can check up the history of how it was visited, what accounts were used, and try and get cookies. Okay, so we have seen that we have the web browser, but also we have other communication tools such as messengers. The more popular ones are Telegram and Sesh. And not to reverse engineer various databases, we can look at our host with Telegram or Sesh installed. We can check those user catalogs. But with Telegram, you need to remember that if we're trying to import a session that has been created, then after a certain period of time, 30 to 60 minutes, this can be blocked by Telegram themselves. They even write it in their official documentation that if you have two sessions, then we'll cut you off and return error 406. Clients such as PSI Plus and Gadgem we can go to update data, and we can look up the data there. We can open these databases with a DB viewer, and we can see who they communicated to, what they communicated about. We can look for some useful nicknames, etc. This doesn't stop at analyzing Jabber clients and browsers, other pieces of software. And then we can use other forensics tools and methods to understand what artifacts can show us which apps were running. We can take user assist, for example, and see what apps were launched. If hackers want to connect to a server, and they would use an interactive session, most likely. If we want to gather additional context and information about what was on the host previously, we can look at artifacts such as recently opened files, the recently viewed directories, thanks to the file explorer that gathers a lot of retrospective data. And then everything else that we could have. The recycle bin, maybe it hasn't been cleaned. Maybe some other artifacts, such as PowerShell commands. Other event logs, such as application EVTX or system EVTX. Various archivers, WinRAR or 7-zip, for example. You could see what archives were opened, what files were compressed. And also the File Explorer search. We have looked at us opening the image and trying to review that manually. We can accelerate that by taking the image and opening it through FTP Imager, connected to the file system of the host where we work, and then run a CAPE utility that would help us extract from the image the artifacts that we are interested in, be it browser or something else. But that is not the most important thing. We also need to parse that somehow. So if you have scripts that can do that, you want to automate so that in 5 to 10 minutes you were able to look at that. And that was a high-level overview of the Windows part of the presentation. To summarize, we look at what apps were launched, the various activities in the browsers and messengers, and which files were opened in the host. I will now pass the floor to Dmitry Kardava, who will talk about Linux servers and our experience of analysis. And to identify the victims that were targeted by particular hacker groups. Good afternoon. We'll proceed to our Linux part. And first is about getting access. Similar to RDP in Windows and Linux, we have SSH. So most often we would observe connection using SSH. And this could help us
IP-адрес непосредственно самого
find the IP address of
либо через какие-то
the adversary, but most often they would use VPNs and proxies, but still that would add to the
системы, может быть, либо AUF-лог, либо
standard artifact list.
также, само собой, мы обратим внимание на WTMP.
We would also look at WTMP.
Могут быть часть событий, если по какой-то причине логов не оказалось.
And if logs are not available for any reason, although that happens quite rarely on servers, you also want to look at the journal.
Потенциально найти жертв.
We can also find potential victims that we try to get connected to using SSH, or some infrastructure. If there was a proxy host,
в каталоге пользователя.
we can look at known hosts in the user
Наш список IOC-ов далее.
folder that would further expand our list of IOCs. We'll understand whether the attackers had further servers or whether they connected to the victims using SSH. Also, you can see that
IP-адреса хэшированные, либо
we can have IP addresses that can be hashed or unhashed. And if hashed,
к счастью,
we can brute force them.
адресов не так много.
Luckily,
Большое количество.
there are only so many IP addresses, and it wouldn't take a lot of time. Although previously,
Просто беря адреса, решили, что это будет достаточно. Как мы все прекрасно знаем, в наше время этого недостаточно.
that was enough, but now we know that it isn't enough.
После того, как атакующий попал на свой сервер,
After the
он ставит определенные инструменты, с
attacker
которыми он будет работать.
gets to their server, they would install the tools that they would use.
Был уже подготовленный дистрибутив,
And
и
it could be a
на нем уже установлено.
pre-prepared
Довольно важно для интерпретации некоторых логов.
distributive,
Мы будем обращать внимание на то,
and they would use the tools there. That's important when analyzing logs.
именно с Debian-based систем.
Often we come across Debian-based
В
system,
таком случае у нас будут логи Debian package.
and then we would have
Соответственно,
logs by Debian package manager.
varlib содержит информацию о всех установленных пакетах.
Varlib would contain information on all the installed packages.
Именно на часть статус. То есть мы видим, что Metasploit Framework, допустим, установлен.
And we can see that the Metasploit framework is installed in this server. We can
Допустим, самый
look it up by
популярный
regular expression, and by knowing the most popular tools, we can establish whether they were used or not.
мы можем обратить внимание на varlog dpkg.
We can also look at
Логирует уже непосредственно последующие
varlog
установленные
dpkg.
На него можно обратить внимание, допустим, если атакующий использовал неподготовленный сервер, либо же он доустанавливал что-то.
If the adversary used an unprepared server or they installed something else, we can see the most recently installed tools.
Похожая ситуация у нас относится к varlog.
A similar situation is for var/log/apt/history.log and var/log/pacman.log.
Для APT. А последний, если вдруг это был Arch Linux, да, если он предпочитает iUsage, by the way, то в таком случае вы можете изучить все установленные пакеты, причем
You could look at all the installed packages, because when a system installs,
логируется абсолютно все,
pacman.log
начиная от самых первых. То есть вы
logs
точно
everything,
ничего не
starting from the first ones.
все будет на месте.
You would certainly not miss anything.
Лучше всего использовать регулярные выражения,
And
довольно простые грепы в данном случае.
it is best to use regular expressions, and some standard grabs are given as an example.
Что же все-таки используют?
Once we understand what is used on a particular server,
Интересует, а как оно сконфигурировано?
we want to understand how it is configured.
Атакующие могут использовать
Attackers
какие-либо приложения для
can use
проксирования либо туннелирования,
apps for proxying or tunneling,
конфигурационный файл,
as we can see from the configuration
На самом
file
деле,
here.
мы только что узнали IP-адрес атакующих. Да, если вдруг вы не знали,
So,
где его можно посмотреть, вот как.
now we can see the IP address of the attacker.
Как минимум, мы можем также встретить в ETC OpenVPN, либо же какие-то другие инструменты. Также,
We can
если атакующие
find OpenVPN,
им понадобились сертификаты, они используют
or if attackers need certificates, they
ETC Let's Encrypt
can use WireGuard or Let's Encrypt Live,
сертификаты для этого домена.
and all the certificates for the domain.
Также их используют для обогащения информации.
We can use that to enrich information,
Все инструменты, в том числе домены, как часть из них, и их
including domains.
Для того, чтобы изучить сам сертификат, можем использовать
To study the certificates,
инструментов, либо K-tool, либо
we can use either K-tool or OpenSSL, and there are examples here on the screen.
Довольно часто мы можем наблюдать то, что
We can also observe quite often that
для
attackers fire up servers to either deliver their tools to the victims or
своего софта написать.
to communicate.
И чаще всего мы встречаемся с такими серверами, как Apache.
And often we come across Apache,
Все используется стандартно.
Nginx, nothing new, very standard configurations,
Файлы,
very standard servers. There are config files as well. Why? Because this could point us how the server was used. It's not enough for us to see that they installed it, but maybe they used the box version of it.
А какие запросы?
And then we need to understand what queries were made.
Изучая этот вопрос, мы можем обратить внимание на файл конфигурации. Что мы здесь видим?
We can look at configuration files, and here we can see that there's a web dev configured,
Могли использовать
so the attackers
довольно-таки успешно сервер для того, чтобы
could
доставлять свои инструменты
use the server
к жертвам.
to deliver their tools directly to victims
Его
simply by mounting
довольно-таки удобно.
that
И
on the
изучая
device.
лог этого же сервера,
By reviewing the log of this server,
запросы, каким именно инструментом производились, то есть что
we
загружалось,
can see
и что для этого
what
использовалось.
tool was used, what was uploaded,
Инструменты,
and if we look at user agents,
тех или иных инструментов, что позволяет нам сразу понять, что использовалось и потенциально что нужно было бы
we can understand what was used,
IP-адреса жертв.
as well as the IP addresses of the victims,
Позволяет нам понять потенциально,
which helps us
что было
understand
скомпрометировано.
who potentially was compromised.
Но самая интересная директория после того,
But the most interesting directory, after we have looked at all the tools installed on the server and configured,
директории пользователей.
would be, of course, the user directories.
Атакующие не
In most situations, attackers do not create
просто
user directories,
root. Ну, то есть
and everything just ends up in the root directory.
что мы там можем обнаружить? Из
And what can we find there?
интересного чаще всего это так называемые .files.
Dat files
Файлы,
or
они по стандарту скрыты,
config files,
мы их не видим.
they are hidden routinely.
Все довольно стандартно.
We don't see them. Quite standard.
Вы напоролись на кале.
Things like bash history or ZSH history.
Также могли что-то искать, хотя на самом деле довольно
Browser, Mozilla, they could be
встречается.
searching for something. Quite rare, but still it happens. wget HTST,
По стандарту настроенный wget используется для того, чтобы
when
загружать что-то, допустим, с GitHub, принудительно
a standard setup of wget is used to download something from GitHub.
относится как раз к HTST. И в таком случае ему нужно хранить где-то домен. Он будет
And for that, you need to store the domain somewhere, and it would store it here.
с помощью
Sometimes you can determine from where something was downloaded with wget, although you wouldn't be able to understand what was downloaded. Vim info. You would be able to see what recent files were opened and what they were looking for. Local.share could also have something. In this case, it's SQL map and some outputs of what we could find.
Соответственно, пример первый у нас bash history.
So the first example, bash history, in many cases it would look like this, because post-exploit network is used in most instances, and the bash history would have its commands in it. The catalog is of interest in itself, because it is to this catalog that the attackers would put the tools that they would use for an attack. There you could have various exploits for web servers, LPE exploits. You could have some custom tools that were custom written by attackers. Often you would see information that was downloaded from the victims. Various scripts. Often we came across publicly available catalogs when they fired up servers. The directories stayed in the user catalogs. And last but not least, today perhaps the most important thing, what we can find, it is the post-exploit artifacts, such as map.exec, Metasploit, Sliver, and Cobalt Strike. Here's a crack of map.exec, even though we won't be looking at it further, but you can look at it. You can see what credentials were compromised, how the attackers moved about the network.
Основная часть у нас с разбором постэксплуатационных фреймворков, а точнее именно их логов.
Our main part today is about post-exploitation networks and their logs, and often that was my feeling, the feeling that I was getting when I was looking at it. Here we have lots of paths. Importantly, Sliver installs in the user catalog, and often it's root, as we have established. Here you want to pay attention to the database that Sliver has, that's SQLite. So if you come across it, you can take the viewer from the official website and you dive into their database. It has most of the information, but it doesn't have a detailed event log. To find it, we will need to go to audit.json. It contains information about all commands executed on the server by all users, if there was more than one. We also have the log of the framework itself in two formats. That's the Sliver log, and the extension could be either .log or .json. They contain identical information. There's also the client catalog, the client who connects to the framework. And it contains two logs. First is the Sliver client log that contains information about all sessions. More precisely,
все входящие команды.
all incoming commands and complete output, so we can see what was run, what output was obtained for every command. This can give quite a detailed understanding of how the attacker is operated. And finally, history contains all connections on the server.
Собственно, у нас имеется такая прекрасная датабаза, с ней удобно работать.
We have this database,
И, к примеру, она содержит
and it contains 19 tables or spreadsheets. Not all of them are useful, and you shouldn't use all of them. For instance, this one, I think that you shouldn't use it at all. I'll explain why a little bit later. But over here you can see an example of an implant build table. So you will notice that over here we have the first ID column. It's sanitized. Then when the build was created, after that the name, it's not the name of the file though, it's the name of the profile of the sliver. And after that 3 hashes will follow, MD5, SHA-1 and 965. We did it this way because a sliver, if you set it up correctly, you will be able to trace its beacons at publicly available platforms such as VirusTotal. So if it finds something, they will notify you that, hey guys, someone found it and upload it to this platform. But if you don't sell this tool that here are the hashes, you can use it. No, you can't. But you should be aware of this. The audit, the JSON audit. That lost its N. This is how it looks like. It looks like JSON, but not really. When you start working with it, you realize that too many escapes, the JSON structure is not complete, and it drives you crazy. To get something useful out of it, and in fact there is a lot of useful information in there, we will have to use scripts. So this is an example of how one of the scripts runs. You can see here information on beacon configuration, all of the beacons or all of the sessions that were built to this server using this console. That's just part of it. Obviously, everything would not fit, but you can see here a lot of useful stuff. You can see the name of the user for the beacon. You see the system, the version of the system. Unfortunately, in case of Linux, it will just take the host name, the device name, not the flavor, nothing extra. The protocol, not the protocol that Sliver uses to communicate. There are 4 different options. Most likely you're going to see MTLS. Sometimes you'll see WireGuard. Remote address. In this case, potentially this is the potential address of the victim, but there is a nuance. If WireGuard is used, tunneling, then we may not be able to see the victim's address at all. And the file name, which is the complete path to the beacon or to the session at the terminal device where it runs.
Нам надо обратить внимание на remote адрес IP-адреса.
Of course, here what's useful is remote address IP addresses. After the analysis, we'll be able to identify the victims or the compromised companies, and the information, the same information, can be derived out of username or host name. Sometimes in the host name, part of the domain is used, especially if it's Linux infrastructure. That's quite typical for Linux.
Доменная группа. Соответственно,
the same applies to username.
С этой точки зрения поля.
So these fields are also critical.
Собственно, второй парсер.
The second parser
нацелен на поиск
targets
событий, поиск команд,
events
позволяющих
and
детализировать
commands that will help us get detailed information about activity. You will notice we have the column method, and then there you see the commands ls, list extensions, register extensions, cd, download, upload, execute, and two arguments. Most likely it's path and command, and if there are any additional arguments, then here we have the second field with the timestamps. We will be able to understand what happened where and what moved where, what was uploaded where, and an additional information about the session, the host name, possible victim IP. C2 address will also be there. Additionally, if these are commands such as upload or call extension, if they mean some uploading, over here you can tell that it's about uploading cuff loader. First, cuff loader is uploaded, and after that, using cuff loader, something else is loaded into the process. All this information is stored in the log. We take it out, and then as binary files, we would add it to a separate catalog. If there are fans of reverse engineering, you have these inputs. Everything is already taken out of the logs.
Также клиентский лог представляет для нас интерес, потому что
The client log is also very interesting for us. In the past, we used to see open session commands very often, but we could never find out what happened inside the session. To learn about this, we needed to go to the client log and find this line, receive stream message data. And everything that's in double brackets is what's sent directly. There will be multiple events of this kind. They sent everything that was sent by the tunnel bit by bit, part by part. You have to collect all this information, merge it, and over here you can see the example. This is Zimbra, and most likely some Zimbra somewhere wasn't patched. Attention can be also paid to the main framework log, but I do not recommend doing this. Yes, you can see the IP. Yes, you can see that it tried calling, but unfortunately it was a scanner. And it's something that happens quite often, so I do not recommend you investigating those logs. Metasploit. Metasploit, unlike Sliver, contains main information on PostgreSQL. All the main events that were executed is something that is of the greatest interest to us. We will also need the file that stores information about the users for the database, the password and the name. Also history. Just like in Sliver, everything quite standard. Interpreter history. In the sessions, we are going to have load if something was downloaded using the commands framework log, and logs for the sessions separately.
Собственно, датабаза PostgreSQL отдельный вид моей
The PostgreSQL database is a separate pain point for me. Actually, they have, 76 columns in this spreadsheet, but most of them pose no interest whatsoever. If you find the database YML, and you will have to find it, in our case it was in the user catalog, you'll find the information that we need to continue investigating the database. You will have to get it running, and it's something very special. Please pay attention. Databases are not compatible by version. You will have to find PostgreSQL of the version that Metasploit runs, the Metasploit that you identified. You can test this easily in the database catalog. You'll see the PJ version, you install it, you use the Credo, and you are happy looking at all these spreadsheets. The events log is the best tool there, all the executed commands are stored there, but they are stored in this ugly shape. If you thought that JSON with lots of escapes didn't look pretty, this is uglier. Take it from me. So you derive all the necessary information, you review it, and this is what's stored. If you thought that it's enough just to migrate from base, no, it's not that easy. Lots of terminal symbols, terrible structure that can't be handled. Well, it can be handled, but it's nasty. And you will have to somehow make it readable for humans. This is what you can achieve. It's the good starting point that you can analyze, you can work with it. You get a structure that's similar to Sliver's. We've got methods, commands, arguments, IDs. Since this is meterpreter, potentially there will be a victim. The C2 will be there also. If a different IP address was used for some reason, then we'll be able to see it. And you can already work with this beautiful structure. And the last tool, Cobalt Strike. I believe that everyone is at least familiar, well, at least heard about Cobalt Strike. If not being familiar, Cobalt Strike is a commercial product. Commercial products should be good, otherwise people wouldn't be buying them. It doesn't happen like that every time, but well, anyway, here is the structure. In terms of logging, detailed logging of sessions, we've got a beacon ID logger that logs the commands, the outputs. It's just that they are separated by IDs. There will be a lot of catalogs, you can merge them into one, but well, it's up to you. It's your choice. Besides, we also have an events log that stores callbacks when beacons fire back and when there is a connection to C2. There is also a weblog. All communications for or about payloads, additional loads will end up in this log. There are also screenshot log catalogs. If we did screenshots, this will end up in this directory. Data is yet another curious directory, and also uploads. If we upload anything, then there will be a separate catalog for it. Looks pretty. Bin files. What makes them exciting is that they are serialized Java objects. They look ugly, again, at least at first glance, in the serialized fashion, but you can work with that because all the necessary information is there. Of course, it's better if you transform it into something that's shown at the bottom of the slide. It's another parsing option. Usually, there are more than 3 items of interest there, but 3 of them are the most important ones. Sessions, all the configs and current sessions are shown there. Then there is listeners. If on this team server we've got listeners, any listeners, this will also be stored in listeners admin file and credentials. This is how it looks like on the screen.
Действительно, это отличные логи. С ним даже ничего делать не хочется.
They're excellent logs. You don't even want to do anything about them. They are ready, off the shelf. Go and work with them. Compared to open source tools, I'm sure that I don't need to convince you. And these are the events log. These are callbacks. This is how the user exited. This is where PowerShell was executed. Everything is logged wonderfully. And the web logs, we can see that there are matches. PowerShell IX. And also all the false queries can be logged here that look similar to framework. So you have to be careful about the IP addresses listed there. History is something they have in common, I mean Sliver and Metasploit.
метасплойта. То есть можете обратить внимание, первый это у нас метасплойт.
The first one is Metasploit screenshot, the other one is Sliver. These are history logs from the two tools. Everything that happened on the server, everything the user did is logged there, totally identical, especially given that Sliver uses MSF Venom for
Стейджера.
their stager.
Вы можете это также обнаружить там.
You'll be able to find that there as well.
Собственно, спасибо. На этом все. Переходим.
Thank you very much. I'm done with the talk, and now I'm ready to take your questions.
Только другое глухо. Нет, вопрос.
О, извините.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Я должен добавить.
Oh, I'm supposed to say also that, yes, I showed you these wonderful scripts, and this is how you turn ugly to pretty.
Мы это сделали.
And we did it somehow. And yes, by the way, this is how we did it. At GitHub, you will find our scripts that we used to redesign those logs.
Через сколько злоумышленник замечает доступ к его системе с минимальным сроком, максимально на вашем опыте?
How long is the response? I mean, how much time does it? These are questions from the chat. How much time does it take to identify that? Well, anyway, let's start with a different question then.
Что там можно найти интересного, кроме блокчейнов, которые утекает на майне на валюту зараженных хостов?
Mining hosts. What do you see there? Well, IP addresses from which connections were established with the server, and basically that's it. When will the attacker notice that the system is penetrated? What's the maximum time? Well, it's hard to tell. Maybe the attackers will never notice that anyone got connected to their system. It depends on how paranoid the attacker is. Sometimes the adversaries, sometimes they will cleanse the logs, and then they will not be able to see that there was a connection with their system ever established, just because they cleanse all their logs. You cleanse the traces. What can be the consequences? Is this legal? Well, we did not enter the servers of the trespassers. Usually we would interpret the images that we received from the legal point of view. Yes, it's dubious. If we were to enter somebody else's infrastructure, then we would be cleaning the traces, but probably we would be doing it not completely, but partially, granularly. No, we didn't exploit the adversary. No, we didn't use their credentials. No, during the investigation, somehow we received images of different servers, and then we studied them. So it's all legal. It's totally legal.
Так, еще следующий вопрос. Вы показали очень много.
Another question. You showed many artifacts,
посмотреть, что.
but it's not everything that you can see at Windows or Linux systems. Do you do mind maps or guides for attacks? Explaining which elements should be considered in different scenarios. Well, yes, the presentation was cut short because otherwise it would have taken a couple of hours, even longer. We are currently drafting a paper to which we will attach mind maps discussing various scenarios on a more general level. Has it ever happened that an attacker's server is a trap for you? Well, no, we didn't have such cases. No, we wouldn't be able to recommend anything to you. Collection automation scripts. Yes, they are available publicly. Unfortunately, colleagues, I ran through these slides. There was the QR code at the end of the presentation. Maybe you can put up on the screen one more time, if possible. The last slide in the stack. Can we bring it up again? No one's listening to me. Can we have the slides back on the screen, please? The last slide is what I'm interested in. There was this question.
Собственно, сейчас нам вернут последний слайд.
That was the question. And the answer to this question is in the QR code. There it is. All the scripts are there. You can take them as is, or you can modify them, you can adapt them. Up to you. The mind map currently is still work in progress. We are still polishing it. But as soon as it's ready, we will post it on GitHub. There is another question. Have you had cases when you would enter an attacker server and it belongs to a third-party organization? No, we never had cases like this, but wouldn't it be fun?
Как обучать или в каких случаях образы хостов атакующих становятся доступны для дальнейшего анализа?
The attacker's images,
В том числе виртуальный ВДС.
virtual VDS.
Ну, тут уже зависит, сказал,
Well,
что есть кейсы,
it depends.
могут дать в рамках
If
помощи.
there is a government authorization,
Допустим, в таком случае.
then yeah, probably. But to connect remotely to third-party servers, we never did that. Okay, so it's difficult to answer the question.
Очень часто для силовых атак создается на разовую инфраструктуру. Как в этом случае ваш подход помогает?
Often one-time use infrastructure, dispensable infrastructure is used to launch an attack. Well, it doesn't happen all the time. If it's one-time infrastructure, maybe there would be a couple of cases like this. Sometimes it happens, say, if the attackers do not think about OPSEC and how to obfuscate themselves, how to take action, not to set themselves up, then probably will be able to see connection between the servers on which they operate. For instance, they connect from one server to another to do a jump server, but in fact, what we see most often is clusters of servers, not one standalone server that is used as a proxy, but or as a C2, but a cluster. We can select the best question now.
Пожалуйста.
Так.
Ну, уточни.
В принципе, из вопросов,
Yeah, I think so.
очень часто для целевых атак ставятся на разную инфраструктуру. Как в этом случае?
One-time infrastructure. I like that question. Do we have this person in the room right now? The person who sent this question? Is this person in the room?
Так, ну, видимо,
Well, no. That's a pity.
подарки мы не можем.
We can't teleport our gifts, but maybe next time this person will stay longer till all the questions are answered. Yandex Drone? Yes, maybe. So thank you very much for coming to our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Поэтому всем спасибо, всем.
Thank you, everyone.
Надеюсь, что остальные доклады.
Have a nice day. I hope other talks are as inspiring as ours.